So
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Heidi.
Heidi.
I started it.
Paula told me to tell you that she started the webinar.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if we're ready, Heidi, did you want to make any introductory comments before we jump right in?
I really had no introductory comments planned, but I would just, for those who are attending from the public, I'm Heidi Kunstl. I'm the director of the Community Development Department. And thank you for taking time out of your evening to attend this workshop and to learn about our sites inventory. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to our team who are doing a fantastic job putting this all together on behalf of the county. So
Okay.
on to you, Ryan.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Vanessa, if you could go ahead and share the presentation. We have a short presentation for you, and then we want to lead everyone in a discussion and be able to get your your feedback and your inputs. So thank you for joining us again for the community workshop number 2 of the housing element update. I just wanted to add before we get started that we didn't actually have this workshop in our scope for the project, but we felt that it was really important to directly, even though it's virtual, interface with y'all to present the sites, to take your feedback in person, and then to show you on the website where you can provide further comments. So thank you so much for joining us today. Next slide, please. So my name is Ryan Lester. I'm the assistant project manager for the consultant team. I work for Mintier Harnish. With us also from Mintier Harnish is Jim Harnish. He's the project director for the consultant team. And then also with us is Vanessa Blodgett and Jason Barnes. They're with Plan West Partners, and their firm is tasked with actually putting together the sites inventory analysis. So they'll be walking us through the sites for consideration. Next slide, please. So what are we going to do today? We'll talk quickly about the state requirements. This is called the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, otherwise known as the RHNA. I'll walk us through that. If you were on for community workshop number 1, this might seem a little repetitive, and I apologize, but it's important to the process to understand. And then we'll talk about the sites analysis process, and we'll do a walkthrough of the sites for consideration. And then we'll facilitate a discussion with any participants who want to share their input on these or any other sites that they may be interested in. And then we'll quickly talk about community engagement and the website, how to comment beyond this evening. And we'll touch on next steps and the project schedule coming up. Next slide, please. So the Regional Housing Need Allocation, it's a mouthful. It's also known as the RHNA. This is the state's quantified goal for every region throughout the state. So the RHNA is the projection of the housing needs in the county across all income levels for the next 8 years. The housing element is planning for 2022 to 2030. So the state of California, the Department of Housing and Community Development, they come up with a regional need allocation for each region of the state. That regional allocation is passed down to regional COG or to staff at HCD in this case, as there is no regional COG, who creates a methodology for splitting up those units between the jurisdictions in that region. Each jurisdiction is given an allocation for each of the income levels, and those are what we're responding to in the housing element. So the county will respond to that housing need by providing capacity for all those units, and then each year they will report the amount of applications and projects that are going through to respond to that RHNA. And then all that data goes back to the state, who then works on creating the regional determination for the next housing element cycle. Now, housing element cycles work in 8-year cycles. This all takes 8 years. So again, we're planning for 2022 to 2030. We're currently in the 6th cycle. Next slide, please. So what does the RHNA look like? Here's a table with the RHNA for the unincorporated county as well as for the city of Crescent City. This is the region that we're talking about. The only 2 jurisdictions in the region. So you can see here that the unincorporated county has 102 very low, 75 low, 55 moderate, and 154 above moderate units to plan for. And we should note that the RHNA, responding to the RHNA in the housing element is not creating these units. It's planning and zoning for the capacity to have these units. The county doesn't produce housing. They zone to allow housing. And so it should be noted that among the RHNA, about 40% of it is identified for very low and low income households. So the county has to meet the state's density requirements to provide housing for those households. Next slide, please. So here we have two tables. The top table compares the 6th cycle RHNA to the 5th cycle. And what you can see and what we want you to see is that every jurisdiction in California had an largely increased RHNA in the 6th cycle over the 5th cycle. You can see it's over 100 unit change between the 5th and 6th for the county alone. And then the table here, you can see that even though the RHNA has increased, the breakdown of by income level is just about the same as the last cycle. So again, over 40% in the very low and low income categories shows a need there. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about income categories, we wanted to give you some data so that you know kind of what we're talking about. So moderate income levels are 80 to 120% of the median household income. Low would be 50 to 80%, very low 30 to 50, and extremely low would be below 30% of the median income. But when you look at the actual median family income, well, either by 2-person or 4-person, you realize that that low and very low and even moderate includes a lot of households in the county. So sometimes people assume certain things about income and low income. We just wanted to give you some numbers so you can see. I think if you make between $12 and $15 an hour, it's like $30,000 a year. So you can see that this would include a lot of households in the county. So we're planning for housing for a large percentage of the county. Next slide, please. Okay, so now Vanessa is going to walk us through the sites inventory process and then the actual sites for consideration.
Thanks, Ryan. So the sites analysis, and I am going to talk about just a little bit of how the county meets the regional housing needs allocation, and there are a range of approaches, and it kind of starts with this, identifying the sites and the sites that are designated for residential uses and sites that could be potentially rezoned or increased density on sites if necessary. And that's just, the kind of basis of then looking at what other constraints are out there, and that is further analyzed and evaluated in the housing element itself. For the site selection analysis, HCD has requirements on what sites can be included in this sites inventory, and it looks at sites that are near or have public services. So if they have water or sewer available or if not, then that is considered a constraint to development. And then all the sites have to accommodate all the different income levels. So we identify sites by income level, and then any other housing needs that are identified. So for each site, we look at capacity, and that is based on the overall size of the site, and then at the density that's allowed, so the development density, and then we look at constraints like I mentioned. So there's physical and regulatory constraints, environmental, coastal zone, and then per HCD requirements, the sites that can accommodate low and the lower income household levels have to be between 0.5 acres and less than 10 acres. And that just has to do with the kind of realistic development of those sites. And then for a little bit of how we kind of got to the sites that I'm going to go through in a little bit is we did start with the 5th cycle housing element for the county, which was done in 2014. So that housing element identified a number of sites. So we started with that, and then we did analysis and looked at which sites had been developed since then, and then got into more, looking at the realistic development potential of those a little more. So we did start with sites that have had previously been identified. And then we also worked with the team and with the county to identify a few new sites. And so what we came up with, and in the 5th cycle, there was a surplus of capacity. So that is good and not, it's somewhat unusual, I guess, throughout the state. So the county does have, available vacant land that's designated for residential uses. And another thing to note is that sites that can accommodate housing, it doesn't have to be designated residential. So commercial sites are also identified that are allow for residential uses. So overall, the total sites that were identified was 1,029. So that is, well over the requirement. And another thing, HCD requirement is to have this 20% buffer for the low, moderate, and lower income levels. And so now we are going to go through kind of all of the sites that we have identified and some of the constraints, an overview of some of the constraints. And as we go through this, I am, anyone from the team or Heidi, is very familiar with all of these sites. And if you have a question, anyone out there has a question, please raise your hand and someone let me know and we can take questions and talk about the sites. So what we did is we kind of looked at it regionally. So we looked at the Smith River region, Gaskey, Crescent City, and Klamath. And another resource for everyone out there is all of these sites we have put online on a web map. And so that link is available on the Housing Element Update website, which we will give that website address a little bit. We'll put it up on the screen a little bit later on in the presentation. And so getting into these sites, starting up North and Smith River, there are a couple of larger sites and then, some sites that are currently being, developed with some single family residential houses. So in this area, the coastal zone is a consideration and a constraint. And then also these are, larger parcels near ag lands. So they have a lower development density right now. So, and they are adjacent to Highway 101, but they can accommodate some above moderate housing types. And so a total of 121 on these two sites, it looks like. And so this is site 1 and site 2, and then we'll go into this Valley Garden site is currently being developed. And as Heidi pointed out, there are, in addition to this, there are potential building permits that have been issued for some of these other ones. So that's great to see, housing being developed in the county. And those are the 3 sites that were identified through this analysis in the Smith River area. So if there are any, if there are any comments or any questions, we could take those now, or we can take them later on too. So I'll pause just for a minute to see if there's any additions. All right, seeing none, I will move on. Thanks. So in the Gaskey region, these 2 sites were part of the 5th cycle analysis too. So they had previously been identified, and in particular, so I'll start with site 4. This one is, the general plan designation is multifamily residential, so it can accommodate up to seven dwelling units per acre. And so that's how we do determine, based on the total acreage and the dwelling units per acre, how we determine kind of a max capacity, and then the realistic capacity is just based on development potential and other on-site site conditions. And then for site 5, we really only looked at capacity of this area that is, has existing development in it, and this area is actually designated, not designated for residential use. So that is not included, although it's part of the parcel, it was not included in part of our overall capacity calculations. And I will pause again because those were the only 2 sites that were identified in that area.
I have a question. What is the current use on that site?
This one, it's my understanding, and Heidi, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but is that part of it a mobile home park?
Yes,
Yeah.
that is the Gasky Mobile Home Park.
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Thanks for the question. All right, so now on to the Crescent City area. So there are quite a few more sites and more capacity in the greater Crescent City area, just due to availability of services, so public sewer and water services, and then overall, other social and shopping and all of that. So there are quite a few sites that have been identified near Crescent City or within the Crescent City area. And did I skip a few? Oops. Something happened here. And I missed site 1 and 2. Oh no, okay, we are on site 6, sorry.
Yeah, it should start with site 6. I think
We're starting at site 6. Great. So site 6, the Harbor Center track, was part of a larger site that then got used for actually mitigation for some other projects. So this does have an existing coastal development permit that allows for up to 94 units to be developed on this site. So that is kind of for this site in particular, that's where we got the capacity for this site. It is in the coastal zones, and then there are potential wetlands on the site, so there are definitely some development constraints associated with this site. The site number 7 is right off of North Crest, and some things to note about these parcels are the front is designated commercial, and then the back of these parcels is designated for residential uses. And then there are, I think some access, so access would have to be worked out for these sites as well to develop residential uses. Summer Park. So these ones are, the ones next door are currently being developed. So this is just looking at this site, and it's designated for multifamily residential up to 15 dwelling units per acre. So it has a capacity of around 77 units. And site 9, Mary Peacock. This one is also, just since the last cycle, it was identified in the last cycle, and it has started to have some development on part of it. So we did, remove the ones that had been developed from this calculation, and then, there are continued, proposed development, I think, on some of these other ones. And it is obviously, forested right now, so there are constraints on portions of this area. Site 10 is designated R1 right now, and so that's a lower density residential use, and their site constraint on this one is just drainage and stormwater. And site 11, North Crest 2, is has commercial zoning currently, so that allows for residential uses with a use permit currently, and up to 15 dwelling units per acre. And so for the sites that are designated commercial or something other than primarily residential, the realistic capacity is a little bit lower than what we do for the residentially designated sites. Site Adams is near some of the other sites that we identified, and this one also has potential drainage constraints associated with it, and just some access considerations as well. Site 13 is just north of the health center, and these ones, for this site, we did only look at this area as in our realistic development potential. And this area is designated, I believe it was designated natural hazard or some forest natural use. And the next sites, East Washington. This is also currently zoned commercial, and then, it could require some minor sewer extensions, which is a consideration when developing the site. Site 15, Herald, is also zoned commercial and is wide open and vacant and ready to be developed at this point, and has services available. No known constraints on that one at the moment. And site 16 is just a small site near the hospital, near other kind of multi-unit and other residential uses. And it is a small lot, but does still have capacity for some residential units. And then one that's right kind of south of that site is this bigger site, which does have a drainage feature that would have to be considered when developing this site. And then these two sites are in the coastal zone, so that is one, just one potential constraint with developing these, and they are designated commercial, but definitely could accommodate quite a few units due to their size. And mixed, commercial and residential units. Site 20, this one is, so it's currently has a general plan designation of multifamily residential, which allows for up to 15 dwelling units per acre, and the zoning allows for R2, 12 dwelling units per acre. So this one, we are looking at potentially rezoning it just to make the zoning consistent with the general plan designation. And then site 21 in Howland Hill, these are, a lower density development in R1 and accommodate up to 6 dwelling units per acre. And that kind of rounds out the Crescent City area sites. And we can get back to any of these sites kind of in a little bit. We will open it up for further discussion. But if there's anything anyone wants to ask right now, I see there is a question, but anything at the moment, and I'll pause for a minute. All right, seeing none, gonna move on to our last site is in Klamath Glen, and this one was previously identified in the last round of the housing element, and has had some development. I am now noticing this aerial is older than this aerial, so this is a lower density use, so 2 dwelling units per acre, and you know, potential biological assessment would be necessary, but this is a, you know, vacant area that is available for residential development. And that is all of the sites that we have identified through this process. And now we would like to get some feedback on if there are constraints on certain sites that we missed, or if there's additional sites that we should consider. So we do have, I will open it up, and we do have a couple of questions to prompt that discussion.
So please raise your hand if you have a comment for us. We'd love to hear from you. You know, basically, are there things we need to consider that we haven't on any of these sites, or do you have a particular site in mind that you think would be appropriate for housing in the county? This won't be your only chance to comment, but it's a good chance. So please raise your hands. Looks like we have one hand raised.
I can't see it when I'm sharing my screen, so if someone else could.
If there's a way to let them in to comment. I don't know that I have that ability. And we can probably unshare your screen, Vanessa.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me? I was unmuted to ask the question.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
So this is Bill Rice, and appreciate all your work in doing this and presenting this tonight. It's very informative. I wanted to ask, in your analysis, what constraints do you have because of the airport? Does that influence height requirement issues on any of the sites that you looked at? Or I'm just curious how the airport factors into thinking about a few of these sites, and possibly I don't know what FAA rules are, but I do believe that there's certain height requirements and certain distances from the airport, and I'm not familiar with any of those for the airport. Thank you.
This is Heidi. We do have an airport land use compatibility plan. And I believe as part of the last iteration, thank you, Jacob, that we reviewed them for compatibility with that plan, but I really appreciate that you've brought that up this evening so we can revisit it and compare it with our maps. I mean, I can think of a couple sites that are not on our list that people have come in asking about development that definitely would be impacted by the height limits established in that plan. But I'm not so sure about any of those that are included in the inventory that we've looked at this evening, but we will certainly double check that. If you have questions about specific numbers, you can email, you have my email address. You can email me separately and I can get back to you on those.
Thank you. That's
You're
perfect.
welcome.
I appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing any more hands raised. I would I would love it if you had a comment for us. I know we just threw a bunch of information at you. I do want to let everybody know, we have a few more slides to go through, but just as you consider giving us your input, that we have a map up on the website, housingdalenorte.com, where you can view these, and you can give us comments any time of the day. There's a little green button on the right-hand side of the website. You can just click that and start typing away, and it comes right to our email. So I will also post the PowerPoint from today up, so you can have the walkthrough and you can look through each of those site pages that Vanessa and Jason have put together, and you can really dig into some of that analysis and give us your comments. I'll make sure that gets up on the website. Well, not seeing any more hands raised. We can
Well,
go
here,
back. Oh yeah, Bill.
Sorry, I don't mean to, I was just trying to ask questions on those two questions. I was wondering if, is there more to the presentation, and there will be another question later that I should hang on to this question for another Q&A, or is this the end?
Oh no, yeah, give us your questions if you got
okay,
it. Now's the
okay.
time.
But I didn't want to, be asking on the wrong topics. Okay, so in what you're putting together, are you looking for putting in information as well that might be helpful to the development community to consider incentives for either workforce housing? So by that, I mean kind of the moderate income, for, low income, very, very low income, which would then be getting more into your affordable area. But will your plan look into, putting maybe incentives, like maybe deferred impact fees, or, that would be one concept, or, maybe, I know the state has different laws, and I'm not totally familiar with exactly what they are, but certain faster streamlining processes for trying to meet the housing element. Those would be, I guess this isn't really a question. I guess the question is, are those things that you're considering and that you want feedback from the community on what would be helpful to encourage you meeting your housing element? So I guess that would be the form of the question that I put it in. And if the answer is yes, then those are two suggestions that I'd like to contribute.
Yeah, so I can start a response to that. Part of the housing element is taking in comments like this, and then working to address them and to address these issues through programs that commit the county to carry out certain things. And one of those that's a major point that's part of the housing element will be compliance with state law. So we have to go through and analyze the zoning code, looking for places where there's compliance issues, and then we have to create programs to become compliant with those. So through the program process, we can definitely not only become compliant with state laws on things like employee housing is an issue that HCD looks at, but also we can work to try to incentivize those things. So I took down in my notes what you've said, and I'm going to look for programs to incentivize that kind of thing, and we're going to suggest them. And so thank you for your comment. Absolutely.
And just one more thing, I guess, to add, maybe as a consideration, because the housing element goes to HCD. There's pros and cons to HCD, but especially because of the ruralness generally of Del Norte County, HCD for the state seems to be the best agency for various housing programs. So even if the housing element has like support for folks that are trying to find, so in us looking to do things, we're always trying to figure out, can we first find federal money, second state money, and then like the last thing we try to do is ask for any local support. Sometimes it's necessary. So sometimes your rules are huge in support, where we can get financial advantages elsewhere for delivering for the housing element. So, thinking of the housing element having, a preference for, or some type of incentives for bringing along outside money from HCD or CalHFA or state, or federal, like there's USDA rural development that, depending on what's going on with rural development, can be helpful or not. I know I've never used it, but they have a single family home lending program. You know, I'm just trying to think of ways that your housing element can connect with some of the state and federal programs, or have a broad net that would incentivize developers to find outside money and say, hey, we can bring this advantage to put less of a load on your county, but yet still be in your housing element.
Great. Yeah, thank you. We will definitely keep that in mind as we're crafting the policy document.
Yeah, and Ryan, we'll get into kind of the next steps in terms of what the process will be for the overall housing element. And then that once the draft is released, that will be available for public review, and that will have all the policies and programs in it that are being proposed. And that will, you know, let you see those and then provide comments or additional suggestions at that time too.
Okay, well, seeing no other hands raised, do we want to jump back to the PowerPoint here?
Yeah, and what I'm going to do, also, I am going to share my screen, is I wanted to just share the online web map really quick. And this is the link that I indicated earlier and is on the Housing Elements webpage. And just to give people a little feel of what it looks like, and it does identify, you can zoom in, zoom out. In case you're not familiar with some of these, you can click on these different tabs up here and change the content. So on here, it has the 2014 sites inventory, the 2022, you can click these on and off. And then, you know, you can click on each site and it will give you the site number, the acres, the name, the zoning and general plan designations. So this is just another kind of resource that is available. And we did put on the coastal zone boundary and also community service districts, because that's one of the big factors, is just ability to have services to these sites. So I think it's a cool tool. So I just wanted to share that it is available. And now I will pull up the presentation again.
And as you look at the map, don't miss the site in Klamath. Way out to see it.
Good point.
Okay, so just real quick, community engagement left for the housing element is mostly going to be through our website or through directly contacting us. We've done 2 workshops now, and now's the time to really put together the draft. So you can go to our website, housingdelnorte.com, and find documents and information. You can sign up for the email list or send us comments directly anytime. I'll say whether we're in a public review of the actual document or outside of that, any comment you send to us, we have to catalog and include in the housing element, and we really consider them. So please use the website and comment if you have comments. We can jump to the next slide. Next steps, one more. Okay, so the next steps for the housing element, we're going to work to take in any comments and finalize the sites inventory. And then we're also going to work on, in the next few weeks, completing the draft affirmatively furthering fair housing analysis. This is a new part of the housing element that is pretty intense. It has a lot of maps and a lot of analysis. So we're wrapping that up. And then we will be reviewing and then releasing a public review draft in early March. We will be having study sessions with the Planning Commission and board. I apologize, it says CC, my bad. With the board to discuss the public review draft housing element. That'll be in early April. We were just scheduling those meetings today. And then after that, we have 10 days to respond to comments. And then we submit to HCD for a 90-day review. Now, that will be submitted in April, but anytime during that 90-day HCD review, even if just because the public review draft 30-day public review is done, doesn't mean you can't comment. So all summer, you can comment on the document and we will read them and we will incorporate your suggestions and comments into our analysis. We will think about them sincerely. So next slide, please. As the project as a whole is a little bit bigger than just the housing element. So right now we're doing the tasks 1 and 2, the housing sites inventory and the actual 6th cycle housing element update and environmental analysis. That will be going on through the year. The draft housing element is due to HCD, or the final housing element is due to HCD September 15th. But in our experience, HCD has been doing multiple rounds of reviews and revision. So we expect HCD, they get another 60 days to review at that point. We expect them to have additional revisions. So I've listed here through November. And then beyond the housing element, once we achieve certification, then we're going to move into task 3, which will be actually working at implementing one or more of the programs identified in the housing element. So that'll be from certification to spring, early summer of 23. And then also we're going to be taking on tasks 4 and 5. Task 4 is creating objective residential design standards and by right development amendments. And we're going to be looking at that through the year. Objective residential design standards, for anyone that doesn't know, these are quantifiable standards that tend to replace design guidelines or any subjective design review process, and create a more opportunities for by right development. And then task 5 is the amendments to ordinances. A lot of this is state law driven compliance, and we will be working to bring the county up to compliance. So that's what's going on with the housing element. Once again, the public review draft will be released in March. We'll have it on our website, and we will be looking for your comments. They're very important to us. Thank you for attending today. We can close the share screen. Thank you so much for being here and listening. I know you have comments, so please use the website and comment. We really appreciate you joining us tonight and taking a look at these sites on our website.
Yeah, thank you all.
Well, have a good evening, everyone.